more you read and write, the more you find out about how things are on the page, how people use their voice on the page. And that's what I'm always trying to get my students to understand. You have a voice, and you have a voice on the page. Your voice is going to be different than J.K. Rowling's voice. Your voice is going to be different Amiri Baraka's voice, or whoever it may be.
That was Curtis Crisler sharing his advice to young poets about finding their unique voice. Stay tuned to hear more about Curtis's journey as a writer on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to the Local Author Podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community and highlighting their unique voices and perspectives. Today's author guest is Curtis Crisler. In addition to being the current Indiana Poet Laureate, Curtis is an award-winning poet and author who has 6 poetry books, 2 YA books, and 5 poetry chapbooks. He's been published in a number of magazines, journals, and anthologies, and is an editor and contributing poetry editor. He created the Indiana Chitlin Circuit, the poetry form called the Synastic, and is a professor of English at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. Welcome to Pages and Voices, Curtis. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Meg. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay! I love it. So I'm going to have you share a reading from your newest book of poems, Doing Drive-Bys on How to Love in the Midwest. But before you do, let me tell our guest a little bit about it. Doing Drive-Bys on How to Love in the Midwest is a lyrical, poetic topography embodying his urban Midwestern sensibility, UMS. Through his UMS lens, Curtis' poems transfigure and chronicle the humanity of the past, present, and future of Black Midwesterners and all globe stompers, transforming our dead and living into one sacrosanct body that traverses this earth with our surreal and haggard breaths. Curtis, the floor is yours.
Okay. So the one that I chose to read is called Skin Rash. Skin Rash. My body, medical scar. My body, mental scar. My body, ancestor. My body, repercussion. My body, keloid. My body, varicose. My body got mouth on it. My body, see my body, my body. My body shatterproof, my body soft tissue, my body peacock, my body platypus, my body not your body. My body target, my body focal point, my body wants she's body. My body erect, my body intimidate, my body deterred, my body retrobate, my body clickbait. My body, I said. My body escape, my body cinematic, my body war, my body fire, my body squall, my body sparrow, my body retro, my body not your body. My body calabash, my body bitterroot, my body chicory, my body questions, my body questions. My body storyteller, my body stretch, my body protest, my body confess, my body undertow, my body thrash, my body hot take, my body burning bush.
Wow. Thank you. I have read a lot of your poetry, and I've never seen you read your poetry. That's incredible.
Thank
you do a wonderful job.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love it. So I do want to talk about your new book, and obviously your selection as the Indiana Poet Laureate from 2024 to 2026. But I want to start at the beginning. When did you know I'm going to be a poet? Is that something you actually thought?
Well, yes. I think you come to this place where everyone, whatever genre or artistic endeavor you're in, whatever you do, actually, you're probably questioning the people who you see or know above you, and you're asking them, am I whatever it is? And I remember going to the former Fort Wayne Indiana Poet Laureate, George Calameris, who's a friend of mine now and who was my mentor, and throwing these poems on his desk and like, am I a poet? And, and we had this 45-minute conversation. That's our beginning of our friendship. I thought he was a professor at IPFW at the time, but he had just got the job. So he's like, who are you? And I'm like,
I'm a poet.
Yeah. And basically, he was telling me about the poems. Some of them were close to finished, some of them were raw, but they seemed to be about love. And we had this conversation about aesthetics and things like that. I had just read Sid Hawthor and Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Oh,
and didn't know about the whole aspect of George and his Eastern philosophies and stuff like that with Zen Buddhism and things of that nature. Things had really coalesced in that moment, but he couldn't tell me I was a poet. For anyone, I think for you to be whatever it is that you're going to be, whatever it is that you're going to be, you have to know that. And you have to set the parameters of this is what makes me that. And I think, too, you'll get ideas or insights from other people who will, may give you information to say, yes, keep doing this, or even if they're not giving you information, you'll probably get insight from that. I remember opening up for Gwendolyn Brooks. I read this poem. She turned around. She looked at me and she's like, shook her head, and I was like, I'm a poet.
That's it.
Gwendolyn Brooks is
Shook her head at me.
Yes. But so it's more of you understanding what it is that you want to do and how you go about doing it. If I label myself anything, I label myself poet before anything.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Then how did you begin? You start sending your work into the world and you just don't know if it, like for me personally, I put it out there and I don't know, is it any good? And then I have gotten really nice feedback, but then
yes,
like how do you learn and become better and how do you begin?
There's nothing you can do more than read and write that's going to benefit what you're doing as an artistic writer. The more you read and write, the more you find out about how things are on the page, how people use their voice on the page. And that's what I'm always trying to get my students to understand. You have a voice, and you have a voice on the page. Your voice is going to be different than J.K. Rowling's voice. Your voice is going to be different Amiri Baraka's voice, or whoever it may be, Nikki Giovanni or Mary Oliver. And just like a musician, for example, especially with like someone who plays guitar, they picked up guitar because they heard Hendrix, they heard Santana or whoever it may be, and they're like, I want to do that. And you start out trying to imitate them, but then you're trying to find your voice too. And then it gets to a point, where's my voice in this? This is me imitating them, but where am I?
Right.
And then you're on that search for that to, solidify who you are. And the same thing's happening in writing and poetry. I think in the 90s is when I decided to become serious about poetry, when I started wanting to get published. And but before that, take it back to fourth grade when I wrote my first poem that I can think of for Black History Month that my mother helped me with. And it was a poem about Jackie Robinson. And from then on, I had a 3-ring binder of poetry through high school and a little bit after high school, when I graduated, that I was keeping and writing and fermenting things on. So, but it was in the 90s that I said, I want to publish. I want to have my voice out there. And then realizing, I need a little more time.
So how do you stay the course? How did you stay the course? And when did you start hearing yes more than no?
It's a mixed bag. It's like I was putting myself in places where poets are. On the academic level, I was doing that, but then on the community level, I was doing that too. So I would be at all the open mics, all the like slams and things of that nature. I had teachers wanting me to come to their class in college when they were teaching their poetry segment and address poetry, and because they heard me read at something. And so those little things is like, well, teachers are having me come to their class. That's some confirmation of, of what I'm doing. Being in the mix with a lot of different writers who come from a lot of different pathways and stuff like that, at open mics and things of that nature gets you to do that. And it's almost like being a comedian in a sense, where you have, you're trying to get in those places and get 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and so you can do your material.
Right.
And it's just comedian after comedian going up there. And then it's like, if someone's known or really good, they go first, and you're just, you can get bumped and stuff. So those no's are kind of prevalent, especially when you're sending out stuff. And you have, the thing is understanding the whole poetry scene. Because I was sending out stuff thinking, okay, I want to be in this magazine journal, and maybe I'm sending out a Black Power poem or something with African American identity to it, and it's a nature journal,
right?
So the aspect of researching and finding out. So that was kind of
so send your poems to the correct.
Yes, and the thing is, it's
journal,
not like
magazine.
you're sending stuff. You're trying to fill out. Oh, I think this poem will fit in here. It's a little bit different, but it has the same topography, the same trajectory or tone that some of these have. So in submitting is totally different than anything else. So I have to get in a mindset to submit. And when I do that, I'll send out like 10 to 20 to 30 things. And that's great, because you get tired of that. But then what's bad about it is when the rejections come back.
You get
yes,
a bunch of ones.
You're getting a week of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rejections, and you're like, whoa, am I really, a writer? Kind of. When I was younger, I was questioning that. And then you'll get one that doesn't even accept it. They may be the one person, the one editor that wrote on it and said, we really like your stuff, but it wasn't for this, could you send something next time? And that's, we say that's a good rejection letter.
Yeah, I've kept those. I have them saved. One of them I look at all the time because I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep going.
Allison Joseph, I remember we were talking about that, and she's like, that's BS. That's just a rejection. so
I don't care if it's positive or not.
Yeah, exactly.
You still told me no.
Exactly.
Talk to me about growing up in Gary, Indiana. How does that factor into your poems?
It does a lot, because I came up with urban Midwestern sensibility, which we'll probably talk about during this interview. What it is looking at the Great Migration of the people who came from the South, came up north into Florida and places like that, as well as California. The people who were escaping cotton and things of that nature for the mill jobs, the GM jobs, the open, just for more financial gain than what was happening with cotton and how they were being treated then. So I'm looking at the past, present, and future of those people. There's this whole aspect of Black Midwesternism that's out there. There's things that are like food orientated in a sense. You think about if you're in Gary, so you could have fish and spaghetti, and that's a meal.
Fish and spaghetti together.
Yeah. So it would be like catfish and spaghetti, and maybe a salad as a meal. And I remember talking to other people, like, what are you talking about? That doesn't even go together. Those are two different meals for themselves, And it's like, no. It's just like when I go over a friend's house and they only have macaroni and they're white. And it's like, okay, where's the rest of the meal? Because macaroni is just a side for
dish.
us.
Yeah, that's right.
Things like that play into it. So you're bringing these Mississippi, Alabama roots into the Midwest. It's changing the way the Midwest is. So Chicago, Detroit, Ohio, Indiana are all being transformed in the way that, we don't have enough room for these people. So now we're building up in Chicago, and we're building up in places like that. In Gary, I know it started out, it was like the mill was almost first, and then it was just swampland. So they changed that, and there were shanties, and now after that, all these different aspects of churches were coming in. You had the great migrants coming in, you had Germans coming in, you had Polish coming in, Latinos coming in. All these people were coming in to get those jobs and
Yeah.
to start new lives and stuff. I'm like one of the last remnants of seeing Gary before it's what it is now.
Kind of in its heyday.
Yeah. So you had Sears and Montgomery Ward's off the street downtown,
Yeah.
where we would go, and Christmas would just be crazy. And I always remember going in Sears, and it was on the corner. The door was on the corner, so when you went in and you turned to the right, the first thing that happened was you were smacked with the popcorn smell because they had the long
Yeah.
bag popcorn. And then to the right, you had those perforated suckers that went all the way down to the floor. You had the dot candies that went, and I just always remember reaching for them when my mother slapping my hand. It's like, no! And, and so around Christmas and Thanksgiving, it was, transformed into something crazy.
Yeah.
And we went to everything. We went to all the parades. There were parades for everything. And you went to the parades. You got to see drill team competitions, a lot of things. I didn't know people were coming to Gary to shop.
Sure.
And so
a destination.
Yes. And so I saw that before all the Sears and all them moved out to Maryville and Crown Point and
Sure.
Hobart and
It sounds very ideal. Like
Yeah.
You had an ideal
Yeah.
childhood.
well, yes and no,
Yeah.
but it was really I don't know. It's like
You at
in
least
one
have good
sense we
memories.
had this freedom that seems to be like some kind of adventure stories in a sense that but it seems kids these days aren't outside as much as
No.
we were always trying to get
Yes.
outside. I remember just
Yes.
sneaking down the stairs because we had these creaky stairs and you couldn't put your shoes on, so you just kind of butt walked down all the stairs with your shoes on the side, right? You got your cereal and then you snuck outside, and the whole thing was if your mother didn't see you, you're okay. So when you came in about noon, she said, "Where you been?" "Outside." "Oh, get in there and do," you're like,
Oh,
yeah,
you
yeah.
like skipping out on your
Yeah.
chores or something. That's awesome.
And so, so just getting outside we were just doing stuff. When I lived in the projects, the school was across the street from the projects, and on the side of that school was this beautiful residential houses. And people had apple trees and pear trees and grapevines and stuff like that. So you would see like 20 people coming from the projects in their paper bags. You learn how to jump the fence. As long as you can run, you could do this. So you could have some people from 3 to 17 all together. Adults knew what you were doing. It's like, don't go out there. You're going to get those green apples, and they give you the,
Yeah.
And so,
The quick step.
And so, but you go and you get stuff, and you come back, and they're like, "So what did you get?" And they're looking at the grapes and stuff. "Oh, I'll take some grapes," and it was just stuff like that. And I don't think kids these days get to see that. I'm not saying you should be doing that, but
Right. It's
Yeah.
just a little bit different. I
Yeah,
agree.
it's just totally
I agree.
different, yeah.
I spent all my time outside in the
Yeah,
summertime. I was
yeah.
always on my bicycle.
Yeah.
I was always at the pool. I had to call and check in with my mom. I can't imagine doing that now. I was like 10 or 11, I lived in a very small town in Ohio.
exactly.
So I would go to a friend's house and I'd just call my mom. She'd be like, "Okay, you checked in. Good." Street lights came home. On.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
rode my
You
bicycle
had to
home.
be- yeah.
And it was 10 o'clock at
Yeah.
night.
If your mother didn't see you, she'd call your name, and you got 3 times. So it'd be Curtis Leroy Crisler. "I gotta go. Give me my bat. Give me my ball." You're
Right.
running home because as long as she see you running to the house, you're okay.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe your poetry to someone who has never read it?
So now, since I always use the urban Midwestern sensibility, it plays under that. So it's looking at the lives, the past, present, and future of those people. So I'm just looking at people who are in Detroit. And so if you think about late 50s into the early 70s, where GM is making cars and everybody is getting these cars, and then they turn on the radio. What they're turning on the radio to is Motown.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like this symbiotic relationship. So you had music and industry happening at the same time for over 12 something years and that kind of thing. Those people are coming to work at those places. The same with the mills in Gary and in Chicago. And you see, if you can get a job at the mill, you are able to provide for your family for the most part until the layoffs. And then in the 70s and late 70s, when the whole thing happened with China and all that stuff taking over, I had a friend, I used to love to be over his house on Christmas because his mother bought him all the stuff that you wanted in your head. And then she lost her job and she had to move in with her mother in the projects. That affects the totality of the community. For example, all the high schools that were there when I was going, when I lived in Gary, there's only one high school left. Of those high schools, all of them have closed. And the thing that I've noticed about anywhere, even in Fort Wayne, if you don't have people who have jobs to move into some place, into some community that will give to having a school, because if there's jobs, then people are going to move in community. I want this house, I want this for my kids, I want, this is where I want to be. And now you have this community where the kids are going to this school. When those jobs leave, those people leave, those kids leave, and that school is affected. And so it's like, now we're going to merge these schools or we're going to close the school altogether. So that makes a big difference in how the population is affected.
So how did this latest book of poetry come together? For me, it kind of read like a journal in some ways. The poems to Zora, Neil Hurston, and Emmett Till are very personal poems. For me, powerful. So how did that all come together?
I think I was writing a lot of stuff during COVID. And everything started to be COVID tainted, so to speak. And I saw people getting published and stuff, and it's like, oh, this is the time to be writing and to get stuff out there that's different, that people aren't seeing, because this is a time people can read because we're all at home. The people who are getting stuff out were getting stuff out at a good time, I thought. But then 22 into 23, by the time you're publishing, if you're publishing stuff and it's just all COVID, it's kind of like, people are kind of drained from it in a sense.
Now they got to read about it all the time.
And so I had to move from that. And then I moved into the doing drive-bys are not drive-bys in the aspect of the slang where people are doing drive-bys and killing people. It's doing drive-bys like how you drove. I remember our family just going to the beach, going to the dunes, going to Gary Beach, going to have a picnic, and just having these drives. Sometimes we just get in the car and my mother would just drive, and you just, hey, we're just,
we did the same thing when I was a kid,
and you're just enjoying the drive, and
I was mostly complaining about being bored, I think.
Yeah.
Now I enjoy the drive.
And so it's that. Each section has the narrator talking to them, to their younger self. So that's how it opens with the 5 backslashes. Each one has that, and it's the narrator addressing their younger self, and they're having this conversation. And the theme of that becomes the theme of that section. I wanted it to be confessional in a sense. When we talk confessional poems, usually confessional poetry is poetry where the narrator is not veiled and the narrator is me or whoever's writing the book. But I'm always looking at how do I get in from a humanistic standpoint to the poem instead of always like hitting the poem head on. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but sometimes I think, okay, if I'm going to write about COVID, now I'm hitting everything that are the charge words and, that kind of thing, versus what if I go in this way? So what if I know Emmett and I'm writing a letter to Emmett? And so these epistolary poems start coming in. So those are letter poems. Okay. And so that's what you get with Zora and Emmett, and even some other poems that are poems about letters to reality. And when that happens, that's when, is it Fukushima?
The nuclear power plant melted down.
That happened, and we were having these floods here. So the narrator is mad at reality or Mother Nature or whatever you want to call it. And so it's like all these letters, and there's different numbers. So you can see there's like 0, dear reality, dear R, dear, they're mad at reality. And so there's these letters that you're writing to reality. And so the epistolary gets you to have these kind of letter poems that become confessional and get you in a almost one-on-one situation versus trying to hit it head on. So me writing to Emmett and talking about Carolyn Bryant,
which is the woman that accused him.
Yes, and later saying nothing that boy did ever could address what happened to him. It starts from that, but then it gets into all the stuff of just I have a few Emmett poems. One of his mother. I remember Mamie came to Fort Wayne, and the church I was going to at the time. I was so tired because I was doing everything. I didn't get to see her, and I really wanted to see her.
Yeah.
And so that's in there. So so stuff like that becomes the personal stuff I have becomes part of it. But then there's kind of this mythos around, like, if we knew each other, how we could be having the turkey burgers and fries, and the seagulls could be stealing our fries on, or Lake Michigan.
Like your friends.
Yeah.
And
and
so,
so,
together.
Yeah, and just coming up with this whole kind of fictionalized mythology around what could have been.
The one about Zora, I believe I learned some things when I was reading that one. They didn't know where her headstone was? Is that right?
Yeah. So she died, and she was really poor. I think she was washing clothes for someone or something like that, and no one knew what happened to her, and then no one knew where she was buried. And Terry McMillan.
There you go, McMillan. It was Terry McMillan. I would bet money.
And so they were actually looking for the grave, came up with the aspect of finding out where they thought it was, and had a headstone.
So the two of them together?
No, just
one of them.
Yeah, one of them, and some other people were looking for where she was.
So I'm going to change tracks a little bit again. So tell me about the moment you found out you were the next Indiana Poet Laureate. Was that a phone call? Did you know you were nominated?
Well, so I got nominated. My friend Marcy Lawson nominated me in 2020, and I made it to the finals. And Matthew won that year. I was like, yeah, that was great and everything. And then she's like, you should try again. It's like, no, I don't think it was interesting. 2 of my friends were on the panel, and they recused themselves. So I was like,
oh, okay.
I could, what can I do? I can't do anything, and I understand the whole thing. And Kevin and I had a book that came out in 2020. So it was like, yeah. So he had to recuse himself.
He was on the panel. Yeah. Got it.
Marcy and I would, when we would meet, we'd talk about it and stuff like that. And then at the last minute, I was like, okay. And I put my name in. I self-nominated. Okay. And then I didn't think anything about it until they said, okay, you're moving to the next level. And I was like, okay. So they wanted, there's like application and stuff you have to do. And I did that. And then the next thing, they've changed things. And it's different. So now you have to meet. I had a Zoom with the whole committee.
How many people is that?
A lot. It seemed like it was 20 people. And I knew 10 of them. And and they all had questions, and you have to answer the questions and stuff like that. And then I thought I flubbed the last question. So I was like,
not going to get this.
Yeah, I'm not going to get it. And I want it out of my head. I either want to know. I don't say anything until I know.
Yeah,
sure. Because it's like, they'll find some technicality, and you didn't win the $1 million. And you're like, I told everybody I won.
Did anybody even know you had self-nominated?
I don't know how open it is. I'm sure they know. The committee knows.
I didn't know if you told anybody in your circle that you self-nominated.
No, not at the time.
Just kept it to yourself.
Yeah, and so Sarah, who's my workmate, I knew she couldn't tell me anything because she's on the committee. And I said, well, I think I flubbed the last. And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. The director, I think she's director, Mia, contacted me and said, I need to meet you on Zoom again to talk to you about something. And I was like, okay. So when she met with me, it was a Friday, and she said, well, you are the next Indiana Poet Laureate if you want it. And
if
I was
you
like,
want it.
yeah, because I guess you have a chance to reject it. And I was like, what? What? And she was telling me all this stuff. She said, yeah, by far your application, what you do, what you want to do in the state, all this stuff was, above par and stuff. And I was like, what? And I was just blown away. And I was like, oh, my mom's going to freak out. And it's funny because everybody's like, what's that? What's Indiana Poet Laureate? What's Poet Laureate? They told me in December, and I couldn't say anything to anybody until after they actually did the marketing and everything for it, and that wasn't until late January. So I had to be mum on everything, so I couldn't say anything.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so hard.
It was. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, what's the number one thing you hope to accomplish by holding the title?
Well, what I'm doing with the pop-up Indiana Chitlin circuits is going to places, and instead of them having, okay, the Indiana Poet Laureate is coming here, and then I come there, and then I leave, and they're like, oh, that was cool, whatever. But when I do the pop-ups, the Indiana Chitlin circuits, it plays off of the Chitlin circuits that used to happen during Jim Crow and all that stuff. So you've heard of the Green Book and how if you had the Green Book, these are places you can go to be safe and to do, to get a place to sleep and things of that nature. Right. So the Chitlin Circus, the way they started out were these places, it's kind of like after hours where you can go to these juke joints or whatever. Entertain, get a little money, get fed, maybe a room for the night, and then go to the next circuit on the list. And so what I'm doing is the same thing. So I'm coming to whatever county that I'm going to or whatever place I'm going to, and getting two poets from there. And so the way the Chitlin Circuit works, we're just doing poetry kind of like they would be doing it in a musical way. I kind of go over what the Chitlin Circuit is, like I just mentioned, and then we introduce each other, the poets introduce each other, and then the first 20 minutes is a round robin, which is just
of poetry, of reciting poetry? Of
poetry. So it's the first poet up sets the tone. So whoever the first poet is, they read something, and the other two poets are trying to find something to play off of what they read. So if it was the Zora Neale Hurston, and it was like, oh, this thing about graves, not finding her grave, and I went with graves, and I had this poem about graves. So I come up there, I say that, and then I read, and the other two poets. So you're always just trying to get to the mic. So and you have so we have just 20 minutes of round robin doing that. Then the next 30 minutes, each poet gets a 10-minute solo. And then after that, we read a poem together, line by line. The first person reads, the second person reads, the third person reads, and then we read the last line together. So it could be what I've read so far. Started out with Lucille Clifton, Won't You Celebrate With Me? The last time I started, so now I'm going into Indiana poets. We did Etheridge Knight last time. We'll probably do Mari Evans and Muncie this Sunday, and then I'm going to go through each poet laureate. So I'll pick a poem from Joyce, Nobert, Karen, I think it's George, Sarah, Adrian, Matthew. And so each time, so that people know that these poets are here. Yeah. And then afterwards, you kind of have an open mic. So I give them a little money. If I have a book, I sign a book and give that to them. But then when I leave now, the people who are there, they realize they have two poets there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I didn't know we had poetry, or I didn't know we had these poets. So now I'm hoping this community can spread.
Sure.
So not just, it's great that they have poets there, but now it's like, hey, there, he did one over here in Evansville, and he did one over here, so we can go to these different places that he did it at, and commute and have this Indiana circuit does their own thing now that I'm not poet laureate anymore or whatever, and you still have the circuit happening.
So you have one of those coming up in Muncie, you said, and do you have anything laid out beyond that?
Yes.
Okay.
So Muncie, Gary, then we're doing the Art Farm. That's in, I think that's in I want to say Cherville. I'm not sure, but
Okay.
And I have something all the way through November right now.
Okay.
So if you go to my website, poetcrisler.com, you can go. It'll be the events page, and the events page is a calendar of
We'll
events.
list that.
Yeah, and so there's stuff there, and then there's an Instagram page where you can see me doing stuff in different places, different high schools like Heron High School and Franklin High School, and being in different libraries and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm wanting it to be a more organic thing to where this takes over and becomes that
Part of the community.
Yeah, so far it's been really great, just vibing with
Yeah.
the people in their territory, and seeing, it's like, oh, we have these poems that are similar, we have these lives that are similar, and it's not the bifurcation that's happening with our social construct right now.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Have you had any pinch me moments since being selected?
I think a lot, actually,
Oh, that's
because
great.
I never know what to expect. It happens, like, we're so busy and trying this summer. We've gotten to the point where we have infrastructure now, and now we know what we can do. So every poet laureate has in their head, this is what I'm going to do. And so when I told them that I want to do the pop-up chitlin circuit, they were like, okay, what is that? And how are you going to do that? And all this. And so we've been able to do it even without like a lot of funding. I was trying to get a grant, but I didn't get the grant. And but I'm still able to give some kind of money, put a little change in their pocket, so to speak, because artists should get paid, especially poets and musicians. It's like, oh my goodness.
They are underappreciated.
So yes. Every place I go, I'm surprised by the location, what they're doing. So I was recently at Nightjar in Indy, and they have the whole street. It's kind of reminds me of Motown, how Motown owns all these houses on the street. You have the original, the studio and the place and the Motown Museum and all that, but they own a lot of the houses on that street and across the street, and there are different houses for different things. There was a house for elocution, there was a house for choreography, there was a house for all these things. So, and Nightjar seems to be doing that too with the, I think it's the Tube Factory. So they have different houses. If you're an artist and you need to stay the night, they'll put you up in an apartment. So if an artist isn't there, they then can use these as Airbnbs. So it's like they're supplementing it.
Yeah, they can have income.
Yeah. And then they're doing stuff. They have chickens. They have a chicken church or something like
And
that.
this is Nightjar?
Yeah, Nightjar through the
Indy?
Tube Factory. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna write that down.
and then the back, their building is, they have a nice amount of land, so it's going to have like commercial shops and stuff in there, along with other aspects of artistic things for artists and stuff. And it's a really big building. They have bees, and it's amazing. And so I'm finding out these things about Indiana that I didn't know about Indiana. So that's always cool. I'm finding out these crazy poets who are doing stuff, who are publishing in different ways and stuff than I do, who have different voices. And then sharing the stage with them and they telling me, I'm stealing this. I'm going to steal this and we're going to use this. I'm like, yes, Gus. And I love that.
So you also created the synastic poetry style. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Or do you have an example of one of your poems that's synastic?
Yeah. So a synastic is, sona is from persona. Astic is from ekphrastic. So you're marrying the persona and the ekphrastic poem together.
Okay.
And what a ekphrastic poem is a poem that looks at usually some type of art, like Ode to a Grecian Urn, things of that nature. You're looking at a picture and you're writing a poem to give words to that visual or to that sculpture or things of that nature. And a persona poem is usually a poem in a persona. The way I'm looking at it, the poem is in the persona of whoever the theme is about. My thing is what the synastic does is move that into a more wider range. So you're not just looking at, the poet is not just looking at a visual. They can look at anything, any genre that anybody does. So if you design cars, if you design furniture, if you design clothes, I could still be in, I can still write a poem to that. The way I went about it in Don't Moan So Much Stevie, a poetry musicarium, is where the synastic came about. And it was me looking at Stevie Wonder, addressing him in the moment of thinking about and creating the songs that he's addressing, that he's written and sang. So I had to, there's some background research I did, but then I was just looking at the incredible amount of, I didn't know how many Stevie Wonder CDs I had, but I had a lot of Stevie Wonder CDs. And just looking at the CDs, looking at the liner notes and things of that nature, and kind of connecting some of the things I knew with some of the things I didn't know. It's putting those things together and trying to make it has to feel like it's from the persona of the person. So,
Okay.
So what I'll do this short piece out of Don't Moan So Much Stevie, and this is called Aisha Life, and I'll read it first and then talk about it. Aisha Life. I lightly place my daughter down in a song, just like two before me placed their son down in a manger. It is all so tiresome, but sometimes a child must rest her head, her eyes, before she masters this bout, this love. So if you heard Isn't She Lovely, in the song he says, life is Aisha, the meaning of her name. This aspect of taking what he
Is that his
literally
child?
means, yeah.
His child. Okay.
Aisha, yeah. So literally taking that aspect of that Aisha life, this opening, I lightly place my daughter down in the song. And it's just Aisha's being placed. And then if you listen to it, Songs in the Key of Life, there's this part where they're giving her a bath and you can hear the water and stuff. And he's like, no, he's saying stuff like, stay in the tub. Now, what are you doing? And you hear it, and you hear the harmonica and everything over it, and they're just, the music is playing and you hear the splashing and all that and them talking. When he gets to that part, life is Aisha, the meaning of her name, it just plays into that. So there are poems in here that kind of give to that moment he's connecting with the song. And so if you can if you can have the synastic feel like it's the persona of the person who you're looking at, then you got it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been doing workshops a lot on that, and people really love it when they're connecting with whoever it is that they want to connect with and do these.
Absolutely. So in addition to all of this other stuff that we talked about, you are an English professor at Purdue
Yes.
Fort Wayne. So you're very busy. What's your favorite part of teaching?
I would say the kids. I call them kids. Sometimes they're older than me, but if you are someone who professes that you're a teacher or a professor or instructor and you're not learning from those people who you're teaching or instructing, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I learn just as much from them as I give to them. And I think with me and what they see from me is that it's hard for me not to address my voice in a way that brings them in so they can know me as far as me being a poet and a poet on the page. And so I'm trying to get them to understand that you have a voice. And so how is your voice on the page? And not to placate me, not to try to write to me. Because what I'm going to say is, this is not your voice in stanza 2. The first part, moving us into from stanza 1, is beautiful. That's your voice. And we can talk about why that's your voice. But then when you get into stanza 2, maybe they're doing something that kind of seems robotic, or it's like they're trying to explain the poem or whatever. It's like, no, And so it's always trying to get them to see that. I think the best thing ever is like being a mother or father or coach, maybe, is when they get it. And when at the end of class and they're seeing it and it's like, I was working so hard on this poem and blah, 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 blah. Now I think I got it to where, and they read it, and it's not even me, it's the other students are like, yeah, oh, I love your voice. When you do this, it's the only thing I can say is to them is, I wish I can have this class for the next class. Because now you've learned to trust each other. Right. You've learned to hear each other and find each other's voice. So if somebody puts something down in workshop, the students are like, nah, I love like the first 2 stanzas, that third stanza, that's not, why are you trying? You must have wrote that last night. And it won't be anything to where it hurts them or the critique is too heavy because you know that they're coming from a good place and they're trying. I don't want to critique your poem at all for the most part, but if something's there, I want you to see that this is what I see in this poem. It's working up into here, then I'm taken out of the poem here, and then I come back into the poem or whatever. I want them to see that so that when they go back to revise and edit, they can see if that's real or not, for themselves. But if I had them for the next class, it would just be bananas because it would be off the chain in the sense of how they would react to each other and how they would push each other without me just, delegating and just like, okay, I like this. I like what you're doing here. That's a whole new, why did you do this? And I'm interested too, but they're pushing each other as well. And it's not competition. Like my whole thing about when we do workshop, how do we help them to make this poem the best poem in their voice? Even if the poem's working, the only thing I put on there is bam with an exclamation mark, and it's like, I have nothing to say. This poem is in the pocket. It's doing everything it needs to do, and sometimes I can have a bam, and other students was like, oh, I felt this, and this, and we're having a conversation, and I'm like, how many times do you have 12 people talking about your poetry?
Yeah.
You can't even get 12 people in your family to
sit down and talk. Exactly right.
But talking about your poetry to this extent. And so that's what I think, and there's a lot about workshops. Some people think they work and some people think they don't, or some people think they're overrated and all that. I'm looking at what I just talked about, how we're getting them to have this exchange about their voice on the page. Is it effective, not effective, or what do you need to get there kind of thing?
Who's your favorite poet? Do you have a favorite poet?
It's a bunch. It's on any given day, it's whoever's going to get me through the next minute, second kind of thing sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot. I've been listening to a lot of local poets lately. Matthew Merriweather, Courtney Jones, Vienne, Didier, last night, Chanel. So I'm listening to a lot of poets, reading different poets, reading different fiction. John Guzlowski a friend of mine. He writes from the perspective of he's always writing about his family because his mother and father met in the concentration camps after we freed them. Liberated them. And so his mother and father met there, and then later they moved to Chicago and stuff like that. I'm just fascinated about here's this person from World War II.
Yeah, absolutely.
And writing this stuff about like how his mother was and how his father was. And I just read his fiction book on Retreat, a love story about a German soldier. And I think she's Polish, Magda, I think she's Polish. And I'm just like, wow. So he's been someone I've been really looking at and for many different reasons, because people are saying, you know, oh, that this is all propaganda, it didn't happen and stuff like that. And I'm like, I know this person. This
right,
person is real. You know, we're losing a lot of them, but what are you talking about? So to do what he's doing, and he's actually on the he's one of the blurbs on my he's the first blurb.
Oh yeah, I see that. Okay.
And so
did you say he's local or he's from Chicago?
No, he they had moved to Chicago, but now I think he's in Virginia if I'm correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just interested in how he's writing about stuff that's still relevant today in this time that we're in. And it's just like, this is what he's always been talking about kind of thing. And so I'm, you know, there's a lot of good writers out there. All the people that blurbed is Justin, Tyrion, who started the whole Black Midwestern Initiative. They have conferences now, and I went to the second one, and it was amazing to see the talent, the people from all over the place. But you're talking the tri-state area, and I don't even know what the tri-state area is anymore. It used to be like Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, but Ohio is a part of that now, so it's like not really tri-state. Yeah. And then if you go through the whole aspect of the Midwest, that thing happens, and now some of these people are living in California or Florida or South Carolina and places like that, but they still have that connection to where they're from, just like I have the connection with Gary.
Sure. What's your favorite thing to do on your time off?
I guess replenish. And I'm always trying to, I love driving, and I love driving to the places that I go to. And I'm finding the more I drive, the more it takes out of me. And so I can only imagine being a truck driver and what they go through. Yeah. So I get home, and then it's like, okay, I get home, I'm going to wash my car because all these bugs are on my car. And then go get some food, go gas up, do the things I need to do, get home, look at what's on my schedule, and try to take care of that before I go to sleep. And then I get up the next day, and I'm like, okay, I'll eat breakfast, and then I go right back to sleep because I'm so tired. My body, you know. So it's kind of like, I realize I need just a day of nothing, just a day where I don't have anything, and it's just me just slobbing out, whatever, catching up on stuff, just lazing out. And so I need those days. So I'm trying to do that. And it just depends on any given week. Or just like Erica will say, Curtis, you cannot do any more things in September. You cannot do any more things in October because we're doing something probably every week. And as well, we will be back in school at that time too. So I've been doing this stuff over the summer, just, you know, without worrying about school. And now it's like, oh, that's right. I have to teach too. So that's gonna be,
I have a full plate.
Yeah.
So if there was a movie made of your life, who would play Curtis?
Ooh, I don't know. I used to be really connected to the to movies and what's coming out and things of that nature, but I don't know all the actors and things like I used to. It seems like I'm relegated to a certain past, you know. I don't know. I really don't know who would play me now versus in what time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe at one time, I guess Cuba Gooding Jr., I don't know.
Yeah, that could work.
I can
see
see
that.
him, yeah, the Boys in the Hood's time when he's doing that.
I keep thinking of, but he passed away. So the Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, Chadwick. Oh, he did. So I didn't know he did James Brown, and he does James Brown. It's like he was really in the pocket with James Brown. Yeah,
He was talented.
Yeah.
He really was. What's next, Curtis?
I'm working on a lot of stuff, and I'm just trying to get to hopefully have a month of being able to work on my YA novel for young women. I have 2 YA books for boys that are published. One is out of print, Tough Boy Sonatas, which was my thesis for grad school to get my MFA. Tough Boy Sonatas is about growing up in Gary. And then Dream is about this boy who gets to go to college. He lives in Chicago and he gets to go to college. And he has this photo album that he opens up and he's looking at it that his parents put in his clothes and stuff. And then he writes these poems to those pictures, so phrastic-like poems to those pictures. And we get the story. It's a story in fiction and in poetry.
Oh, okay.
And so since I've written 3 books about boys, I want to write 3 books about girls. And so the 3 books about the girls are basically called Cheetah and Earl. And Cheetah is the girl, and Earl is this lion that comes to life in different ways. And it's kind of a urban fantasy novel, or it's going to be a trilogy.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to finish the manuscript, the first one, before school starts, but I keep getting pushed back.
You're so busy.
Yeah.
Very busy.
So I'm doing that and just trying to get to my stuff. I have other books of poems and stuff that I have that I want to get to and get out there. A playbook for an urban Midwestern sensibility. I want to get out there. It's a craft book, but it's not teaching you UMS. It's showing you how UMS looks through poetry, fiction, essays, and drama.
Okay. So you mentioned this earlier, but I just want to end with it. How can listeners reach you?
Okay. Go to poetcrisler.com. That's poet, CRISLER.com. I had to think about how to spell my name. And that's my website. So you can, we always update things that come to play. So you can see where I'm going to be. And if you have questions, you can email me and I can give you specifics. But sometimes we're in flux, so there may not be a flyer or something for that event. But if there is, usually we have the flyers out and are putting them out like all the time. So we're always updating that. And that's probably the best way. And if you come to an event and you connect with me, I have my electronic business card now, so you can take a picture of the thing and get all my information.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. This is so cool.
Yeah, it's been an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices, a source for local authors and their stories. From the studios of Access Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library in downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm your host, Meg Bell. A special thank you to Kay Gregg for her work engineering and editing this episode. We've explored fascinating stories and insightful discussions today, but our journey doesn't end here. Find more episodes of Pages and Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the area's authors and their insights into the written word. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.